In the early 1960s, America's civil rights movement was gaining ground. The idea of two separate Americas, one black, one white, was becoming unacceptable to many. The vision of racial equality was gaining ground. But in the segregated South, the fight for equality for all Americans represented a threat to hardliners who hid behind the excuse of tradition or heritage. Among the pillars of the racially divided South was college football. Having an African American play in Southern stadiums had never occurred. That is until one man chose to make history and open the doors for generations to follow. As part of Black History Month, ACMi News salutes Darryl Hill, often known as the Jackie Robinson of college football, who by himself managed to move the chains and by doing so, forever changed the face of college athletics.
My attitude was and still is, those who harbor prejudices, they have the load and burden to carry, not me.
From McLennan Park to Spy Pond, from Poets Corner to the Mystic River, we have Arlington covered. We're your neighbors, a friend you can turn to, giving you stories that count from people who care, dedicated, determined, dependable. This is ACMi News.
You were among one of the few people I know in my life who actually went to the I Have a Dream speech. Can you tell us about that day, August of 28th, I believe, in 1963?
Well, I never will forget it because it was a large electric crowd, larger than I had anticipated. And of course, I was a native Washingtonian, so we were right at home, surrounded by friends and visitors from out of town. I was so far away from Dr. King, from the steps, I think it was the Lincoln Memorial, as I recall. Heard him well, and we were really energized by it. So, and I went down with couple of my teammates, white teammates from Maryland, to the speech, and they were just, overwhelmed. I can't remember who went with me. Sorry to say, but it was a carload of us. We drove over from the campus and spent the afternoon in D.C.
That was a very stirring speech, and it's one of the most historic speeches in U.S. history. Kennedy, JFK, who was a great orator himself, saw that speech and went, "My gosh, that he can talk." And I'm thinking, well, if you get a compliment from JFK about speech making, but it goes way beyond that with Dr. Martin Luther King. What did you take away from that day when you walked away after the speech was over?
Well, what I took away was that King basically was pushing for equal rights, but pushing for equal rights in a peaceful manner. But I think he reached everybody's heart and soul when he said, "I had a dream," and that all men were created equal, and blah, 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 blah. It just grabbed you. I can remember the reaction of my teammates. They were really, kind of hyped up about it. It seemed to move them as much as it moved me or, other African Americans in the crowd. I think it moved everybody.
Absolutely. It still does. All these years later, it still does.
It still does. It still does.
And you were kind of a reluctant person to carry on that legacy. You weren't really sure, from what I gathered from what I've read about you. First of all, you were the first African-American player at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, correct?
Correct.
And you were also a favorite target of Heisman Trophy winner, future Hall of Famer for Dallas Cowboys, Roger Staubach.
I was.
Tell us about that experience.
About 400 plebes tried out for the football team, literally. And about 20 or 30 of us, they put us on a side field, didn't give us any gear, just put us over there in shorts and gave us some footballs and basically said, you guys go over here and play catch. And the rest of the guys were scrimmaging and tackling. And, we're wondering, we said, what the heck? Where we going to get our chance? Meantime, I see this tall, lanky guy and he's running across the field, throwing bullets on a dead run. Bam. I said, hey, who are you? He said, my name is Roger. I said, well, Roger, you can throw. He said, yeah, well, I threw you a couple. I noticed you can catch too. So the 20 or 30 guys apparently were the recruits, the guys that they knew were going to be on the team. So they didn't have us go with the tryouts. And Roger and I were on the second team that day. So with his usual confidence, walks over and says, Darryl, we're going to scrimmage Saturday, right? I said, yeah. He said, when they post this Monday, you and I will be on the first team.
Wow.
Just like that.
That's incredible. And you broke the ground, you broke the mold there at in Indianapolis at the Naval Academy. The University of Maryland, Lee Corso, the assistant coach at University of Maryland, is going, hey, this is our guy. We're Division I, we're ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. No African Americans playing in that entire conference. And we're talking about NC State, Clemson, Wake Forest, places like that. They're courting you and they want you. You have the grades, you're the man, they want to break the mold and you're the guy to do it. And that's why I said you're kind of reluctant, because from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you said something to the effect like, hey, I'm no Jackie Robinson. I just want to play some football.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, I said, I said, Coach, can I remind you of what conference you play in? And he said, well, that's just the point. We've decided here in Maryland that it's time for us to break that freeze. Actually, I was the first African American to play for any major university in the South, period, below the Mason-Dixon line. So that was the Southeast Conference, at the time, Southwest Conference, and the ACC. So sort of a Jackie Robinson of sports, for college sports in a certain way.
Oh, it's not sort of, it is.
And I was the first African American to be given a scholarship to play any athletics at any college in the South. So I said, Coach, I don't know whether I want to live under a microscope. I'm not trying to be Jackie Robinson. I want to go to college and I want to play football and have fun, chase girls, drink beer, do what students do without all the scrutiny that's going to come along with this. And so he pressed the right button. He turned around and said, oh, I see. Then you're afraid, huh?
Oh, man. You don't want to hear stuff like that. Now you want to prove
I said, okay, Coach, you got me.
Well, you certainly weren't scared. You went down to the belly of the beast, so to speak. You went to Clemson. You played games at Wake Forest. You played games at NC State. This is 1963, the height of Dr. Martin Luther King, the fight for civil rights. African Americans, women, a lot of other groups of people are marginalized in society. Tell us about your experiences down south.
Well, the problem down south was more the fans than the players. I have to say that I never had a player curse at me. I never had a player make a dirty hit or gouge or anything like that. Now they roughed me up, but that came with the territory of being a good player, not necessarily because I was black. Which was very, very interesting. And I could sense the camaraderie. There was a certain camaraderie there. These guys, more than once, the player had come up to me, we don't like this circus, we just want to play this game and have fun. But the fans were nasty. And they had organized racial cheers and the whole 9 yards.
I remember you telling me when I believe you went to Clemson, African Americans were not allowed in the stadium, and they had a hill where
they had a hill. They called it N Hill, and that's where all the African American N Hill, the hill. Yeah, that's what it was called.
Yeah,
and they sat outside and on the hill, on the grass, on the dirt actually. and watched it. So when I came in to play Clemson, that hill was packed. So then it got to be funny, you know, doing the warm-ups, I'd catch a punt and everybody on the hill would cheer, you know. And if I dropped it, the other people with the white fans in the stands would boo, and it was going back and forth like that. And then I could tell the turn with the Clemson players. You know, finally in the third quarter, I got banged, and then it was in a pileup. And I looked over, and one of the players was giving me the thumbs up. Yeah.
While you're sitting in the pile.
While in the pile. Yeah. Now, he was doing it carefully, you know, because he didn't want anybody to see him. But, you know, the point was that the players were there, you know, and more than one player, Brian Piccolo, for example, we went play Wake Forest, and they had the organized cheers, you know, get the end off the field, you know, rah, rah, rah. And so Piccolo walks over and puts his arms around my shoulder and turns toward the Wake Forest cheering section. And you could have heard a pin drop in the joints, because he was their biggest hero, you know, the greatest player to ever play, or one of the greatest players to play for Wake Forest, and, you know, leading the nation in ground gaining, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But that took courage for him back then. He could have been ostracized, you know, taken down for that, taken off the pedestal that he was up on.
It seems like sports was the first institution, or among the first institutions in the country, that accepted integration, and the fans were just behind the times. You have a story when you went to Clemson. Your mom took a train all night.
And she would take the train, like she went down to Wake Forest on the train, you know, down to South Carolina on the train, and down to Clemson. And it was a long ride, you know, it would take hours. And so my father took my mother aside, and he said, look, I remember we were sitting at dinner. He said, do not, his name was Palestine. He said, do not go down to Clemson. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm not going down there, you know. So, and I was sitting right there, you know, and I was relieved. And I'm warming up for the game, and one of the assistant managers come, team managers, said, can you come over here to the side gate? And I go over there. There she is outside with the ticket. They wouldn't let her. Little smart aleck ticket agent says, can't you read, lady? And, you know, and the manager
Your mother in front of you?
Oh my God. Two managers had to grab me. I would have been in jail.
Good for you.
And so a couple walks up, and he says, let me introduce myself, Mrs. Hill. I'm Dr. Robert Edwards. I'm the chancellor of Clemson University, and this is my wife, Louise. We're going to take your mother up to our booth. And as a matter of fact, we're going to invite her to stay at our house overnight so she can get the morning train. Don't have to ride all night. And you go play the game. And his wife, Louise, she said, go show. You know, when I came out, the game had started. You know, I ran out on the field to a chorus of blues.
Back then, with all the racism going on, and these places, they were more than football stadiums to a lot of fans down there. They were cathedrals. This was a religion. There was a ravenous love for this game, just like people going to church.
They saw me as desecrating this temple that they worship the God of football in. You know, that's the way the fans saw it. You know,
your stories would sound today to a lot of people as being absolutely outlandishly bizarre.
Well, you know, younger people for sure. You know, they don't get it. You know, I periodically I'll go in and talk to the kids in Maryland, and I tell them the stories, and they're like, "What? That couldn't be. That it couldn't have been like that." You know.
I remember a story that you told at NC State. Your life was threatened by none other than a sniper.
Yeah, the very first game I played at Maryland, and my roommate's name was Hill also. Walter Hill. He's the second black that Maryland recruited, but he was a freshman at that time. Freshmen couldn't play on the varsity. You know, they have freshman teams. Mm-hmm. So somebody called the dorm and said, let me speak to Hill. And he went to the phone, and they said, look, you go out there on that field, and we're going to be on top of Elegant Hall. There were some dormitories, the upper deck that's at Maryland now. wasn't there at that time. And you could see because kids used to watch the game from the dorm, upper rooms. So we're going to be in one of those rooms in the dormitory across with a high-powered rifle. We're going to shoot you. And so I said, Walter, look, don't tell nobody. They're just trying to scare me. They won't let me play if you tell the coaches, and certainly don't tell my parents. So he didn't. And I went on out to play the game, and I fumbled the opening kickoff. I was looking up on the roof of the dormitory. Fortunately, it bounced back right back up bounced back up in my arms. I ran down. Actually, I had a nice little run right about the midfield. They had a cannon in the end zone.
Anytime a touchdown would be scored,
a touchdown was scored, they shoot this cannon on it. It was real loud. I scored a touchdown and the cannon went off. And I thought somebody had shot me. So I fell down on the ground. And so my teammates thought I was playing around. They said, "Stop clowning."
You're not playing around. You're still looking at the door.
I'm saying to myself, if you only knew. And I never told anybody about that, for the whole season, at all until after I left there.
That's incredible. You seem to have such a great attitude. If you're hiding any bitterness, I don't see it. But when you look back on those days and you said, look, I don't want to be Jackie Robinson, I just want to play football, you must have realized when you're going down south and going to these, the Lions Den, you had to realize I'm breaking new ground here. I'm taking a lot of crap is what I'm doing, needless crap. And you just seem to have an attitude about it looking back on it.
My attitude was and still is, those who harbor prejudices, they have the load and the burden to carry, not me. It takes a lot to hate people in such a way that people are hating people to this very day. It takes a lot away from you. And it's unsatisfying, it's ungratifying. So I don't have a problem. And I was never afraid, And, some people say, well, why weren't you afraid? I said, because I was young and dumb and it didn't, I knew what the intention of all of that was, and I tried to see it sometimes from the other side of the fence. And when I was at Navy, for example, they interviewed all of the kids in my company to see who was willing to room with me. I was glad they did, because I didn't want to room with anybody that didn't want to or didn't like me, right? Especially at Navy, because Navy, your room and your company is your thing, and they come in here, room inspections, and you and your roommate got to be in sync,
Okay.
This guy happened to be from Mississippi. They wanted to room with me, and his parents had cotton plantations.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So he was wealthy. There were big time plantations, with big spreads. His last name was Cartwright. I used to call him Hoss. Hoss Cartwright.
Dan Blocker, yeah.
He said, look, I'm from Mississippi. I grew up on this cotton plantation. I've been taught from birth that blacks are inferior and, blah, 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 blah. He said instinctively, intellectually, that didn't sound right to me, right? He said, regretfully, being on a plantation with people who were basically almost slaves who weren't educated, and weren't given the benefit of learning and sophistication. And so they did little to, dissuade this myth that they were putting down. He said, so I want to room with somebody that's every bit my equal, if not my superior. He said, if you're willing to do it, let's do it. So I said, sure, let's do it.
As equally competitive as you were in football and as groundbreaking as you were in football, post-football career, you start owning businesses. You're owning an eatery in Washington. You met Buckminster Fuller, Margaret Mead, Jonas Salk, like Forrest Gump, really.
Sort of, yeah.
When you look back on your life, and when you think about that day in 1963 on the mall in Washington at the Lincoln Memorial, what Dr. King had to say,
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
You have got to be satisfied and realize, you know what, I was a reluctant person to do this, but damn, I'm real glad I did.
That's one thing for sure. I can't look back on my life and I could never say, I wish I would or I wish I could. I did a lot of things and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I figured out early in the game that if African Americans were to be gain a true equal status, it's all about economics. And the base of our economy is the business economy.
Sure.
So I started early in the game in trying to promote minority business ownership and development. I ran 2 or 3 agencies in Washington, D.C. The last one was called the Greater Washington Business Center. And it was a minority business, government-funded minority business assistance program. And, I got to say, we assisted over 2,000 Black businesses and started over 400 brand new African-American businesses. So that's something I'm proud of. One time, President Richard Nixon, as a matter of fact, invited me to a panel. It was like the heavy hitters of the time, and not, mostly the African Americans, but a mixed panel. And they asked each person on the panel, what individual did they think had the most impact on African American well-being in the United States? And of course, you got the usual Martin Luther King, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, Abraham Lincoln. And I said Stokely Carmichael. And they said, Stokely Carmichael, why? I said, because he did one thing. He had one thing.
We have to understand that we're talking about our survival and nothing else. Whether or not this beautiful race of people is going to survive on the earth. That's what we're talking about. Nothing else. Nothing else.
He said, Black is beautiful. And I'm Black and I'm proud. And until Blacks got past this sense of inferiority, they were going nowhere. There was a change in the 60s that came from that. You got a lot to be proud of here. Let's be proud of your heritage and who you are and what you can do. I thought that was the most important thing, and that's when the African American community began to flip the script and get off dead center. The 60s was probably the most telling time, in the history of African Americans in the United States, I think.
What advice do you have for people, not just African Americans, but women, anyone who may feel as though they're marginalized by society? You obviously took up the mantle yourself, faced a lot of adversity, overcame a lot of it. But what advice, because you would be the sage to give this advice?
Well, first of all, don't be afraid. So you can't let someone cower you, even if it's economic pressure and cowardice. You got to stand up, for what you believe and what you think, and then have the confidence to believe that you're capable of getting anything done and you can operate in any environment. If you let them make you feel that you're not capable, then you're not going to perform properly. So you got to be strong, and you got to have a undying faith in your abilities. Don't get angry. Anger serves no useful purpose. You can hold it inside and use it to drive yourself, but yelling and screaming and pushing and shoving gets nowhere. So
you echo the sentiments of James Baldwin, the world-renowned author, who basically says, and you said it earlier, that anger takes a lot of energy to carry, and there's way more to racism than just, the color of your skin isn't mine, so therefore I'm going to marginalize you. It goes way, way deeper than that.
That's correct. That's correct. And it's this feeling of making people feel unworthy. And that's systematically done. I mean, it went all the way back to the time of slavery. That was, you intimidated the slaves, and then you made them feel that they weren't capable. and until you could overcome that, sometimes it's driven and, it's based, and I kind of was fortunate to have a little taste of all of it, growing up in the 50s and watch the evolution and the change.
You can always check out our latest segments and newscasts on the web at acmi.tv/news. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ACMi News. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. You'll find us at youtube.com/ACMi News. If you have any news tips for us or wish to become a citizen journalist, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at news@acmi.tv or stop by ACMI Studio A at 85 Park Avenue.